U.S. temporarily pauses sharing key intelligence with Israel over Gaza war. Israeli airstrikes kill 3 across southern Lebanon. U.S. and Ukraine delegations meet the German Chancellor in Berlin. Reuters revealed that the U.S. intelligence officials temporarily suspended the sharing of some key information with Israel during the administration of former President Joe Biden due to concerns about how the war in Gaza was being conducted. Reuters reported that the United States also restricted how Israel could use some intelligence in its efforts to target critically important military sites in Gaza. The two sources declined to specify when this decision was made. The spokesperson for the UNRWA, Adnan Abu Hasna, said that the Israeli intransigence regarding the entry of humanitarian aid targets all aspects of life, noting that 100 types of food items and other goods are still barred from entering the Gaza Strip. And he added that the number of trucks currently entering the Strip is better than before, but it does not meet all the needs inside Gaza, given that the demand is enormous and substantial. He explained that the health sector in Gaza is among the most severely affected, suffering a major collapse and continuing to face serious problems due to shortages of medicines, equipment, and medical staff. The Israeli occupation army announced that a Palestinian was targeted after crossing the yellow line north of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Palestinian presidential advisor Mahmoud al-Habbash held Israel responsible for dragging the world into a cycle of danger, retaliation, and hatred based on ethnic and religious grounds. Hamas's Gaza chief Khalil al-Hayya has confirmed that the senior commander Ra'id Saad was killed in an Israeli strike, the most high-profile assassination since a ceasefire took effect in October. In a statement, al-Hayya accused Israel of violating the truce through continued strikes, killing and the obstruction of aid, and warning the ceasefire was at risk of collapse. He called on the mediators, particularly the United States and President Donald Trump, to pressure Israel to uphold the agreement. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz said Saad was targeted in response to a Hamas attack earlier on Saturday, in which an explosive device wounded 2 Israeli soldiers. The Israeli Broadcasting Corporation has stated the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire remains stalled due to a lack of international consensus. The sources said this uncertainty complicates implementation of the next phase and leaves the region's security situation unsettled. Israeli agencies are also closely monitoring the status of soldier Ran Goeli, still considered held captive in Gaza, which remains a priority in future negotiations. And the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza since the start of Israel's military operations on October 2023 has reached 70,663, with women and children making up the majority. Injuries have climbed to 171,139, many of whom remain trapped under rubble as emergency teams struggle to reach them. Over the past 24 hours, 9 Palestinians were killed and 5 newly identified and 4 newly confirmed, with 45 others injured. Since the ceasefire on October the 11th, 2025, Gaza authorities have recorded 391 fatalities and 1,063 injuries and recovered 632 bodies. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv to protest the government's handling of the October 7, 2023 incident. Demonstrators accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's administration of evading accountability and opposed plans to let him choose members of a state inquiry into the events, arguing it would compromise its independence. Protesters vowed to continue demonstrations until the government secures a detainee's return, a key part of a U.S.-brokered plan for peace between Gaza and Israel. Protesters stressed that the public has a vital role in defending democracy and holding the government to account. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Mark.
Thank you very much, Salma. Yes, now we're joined from Cairo by the political science professor at Al-Quds University, Ayman El-Rakab. Thank you very much for joining us here. So how might the temporary suspension of U.S. intelligence sharing with Israel impact Israel's military operations and decision-making in Gaza?
Welcome you and welcome all the viewers. We think clearly that the monitoring side provide many services for monitoring and following up with the Palestinian society, and this help the occupation a lot. And from the following up from the occupation, and also for the different sides monitoring Gaza, this make the occupation and creating some violations. If the U.S. administration is ready for moving to the second phase of Gaza's agreement, accordingly not, because the defense is high and they are still making violations and operations on Gaza Strip. Let me say that many immigrations and forced displacement of Palestinians are still continuing in Gaza Strip, from Gaza Strip, and they want this to make it as they want, without any controlling and without any reaction or reply. But the administration, from the announcement talking about the stopping or halt the war for the Israeli side, there is no any clear announcement. And we saw this before. They going to different borders and they say that this is the new borders between Gaza and Israel, and this make an evidence, a clear evidence for a will for making more violations. And as we referred before, there is a silence from the U.S. and we cannot find any clear announcement from the U.S. of talking about the new borders of Gaza. And this is an evidence that Americans are neglecting or biased against Israel's.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. How is Israel still getting away with having limits on humanitarian aid, the food and medical supplies that are getting into Gaza?
Unfortunately, Israel is still violating so far. There is no delivering aids. Expect 30% delivering aids, because Israel is controlling these sides and controlling the delivering aids. So we are speaking about the insufficient aids and insufficient medical supplies. And as I referred before, there is a great silence from the American administration, and this is rejected from the American administration as not or preventing speaking in one way or another of stopping or halting Israeli side from one way or another between the Israeli and Palestinian side. This is making clear that there is an American will to give a marginalization regarding the Palestinian side and not feeling what they are feeling really, and to halt the war and to halt the hunger going in Gaza Strip. As American, for the American there is no clear announcement of the occupation, and even the administrative or following up administration, they are not talking about the violations of Israeli that still going on for more than 60 days, sorry. So I'm saying that there is insufficient ways in the food and medical supplies, and what is rest for it is not sufficient for the Palestinian people.
And of course, the collapse of Gaza's health sector is not making matters any better.
The health sector is affected greatly because they're working only for 10% of their power. They have no services and no materials. As I said before, there is an expanding of the diseases in Gaza Strip resulting from the circumstances and the spreading the disease, and not providing any medical support, as I said before, or medications or any, as they are working with the very limited aids.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Q News. Professor of Political Science at Al-Quds University, Ayman El-Rakab. And it's back to you, Selma.
Thank you, Mark. 3 Lebanese citizens were killed and another wounded in separate Israeli airstrikes targeting multiple areas in southern Lebanon. 1 person was killed and another wounded when a motorcycle was struck in Yatir bin Jbeil district. A second citizen died in a raid on a car. Additionally, a municipal council member in Tyre was killed in an airstrike, bringing the day's death toll to 3. Israeli drones also targeted excavators in Sheba and a house in Aitarun. And moving on, the U.S. President Donald Trump has condemned an attack in Syria that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian interpreter on Saturday, with 3 other soldiers wounded. The suspected Daesh attack targeted a convoy of American and Syrian forces in the central town of Palmyra, an area not fully controlled by the Syrian government. U.S. and partner forces killed the lone gunman. Trump described the victims as great patriots and said the Syrian president was devastated by the attack. He promised serious retaliation against Daesh and offered prayers for the victims and their families. Central Command and U.S. officials are withholding the names of the deceased until next of kin notifications are complete. Thailand has imposed a curfew in its southeastern Trat province after gunfire was reported overnight as clashes with Cambodia spread to coastal areas of their disputed border. The curfew follows renewed fighting despite earlier claims by the U.S. President Donald Trump that the 2 sides had agreed to stop hostilities. The conflict has flared repeatedly this year since a Cambodian soldier was killed in a May skirmish, displacing hundreds of thousands on both sides. Thai forces said they destroyed a bridge used by Cambodia to move heavy weapons and launched strikes on pre-positioned artillery in Cambodia's coastal Koh Kong province. The curfew applies to 5 districts of Trat province bordering Cambodia, while Thailand's tourist islands in the area are excluded. Delegations from the United States and Ukraine were welcomed by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Berlin ahead of negotiations over a US-backed peace plan. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, senior negotiator Rustem Umerov, US envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner attended the talks. The officials reviewed a 20-point plan aimed at achieving a ceasefire, though Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine is not holding direct talks with Russia. The meetings precede a broader summit in Berlin on Monday, with European leaders underscoring continued international support for Kyiv. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said Kyiv is prepared to give up its long-held ambition to join the NATO in exchange for firm security guarantees from the United States and European partners. Speaking ahead of the talks with the US envoys in Berlin, Zelensky said Article 5, like guarantees from Washington, alongside commitments from Europe and other allies, would be a compromise aimed at preventing future Russian aggression. He said Ukraine had not received yet a formal response from the United States, but had sent updated proposals acknowledging the plan would involve difficult compromises. Zelensky added that a ceasefire based on current front lines could open the way for diplomacy, urging the US support despite expected resistance from Russia.
Legally binding security guarantees for our country. About an hour ago.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has said he is preparing for meetings in Berlin with the US representatives and European leaders to discuss a political agreement to end the war. He condemned recent Russian strikes on Odessa and a civilian food vessel in the Black Sea, calling the attacks a direct challenge to global food security and promising an international response. Zelensky also announced the return of 5 Ukrainian civilians from Belarus alongside released Belarusian political prisoners, marking a significant step in diplomatic efforts supported by the United States. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has called for a dignified peace and firm guarantees against renewed Russian attacks as he prepared for talks with US envoys and European allies in Berlin. Zelensky accused Russia of prolonging the war through continued bombardment of Ukrainian cities and infrastructure as Kyiv faces pressure from the US President Donald Trump to reach a peace deal. A US official said Trump's envoy Steve possible progress nearly 4 years into the war. Zelensky said that the coming days would be filled with diplomacy and stressed that negotiations must deliver concrete results ahead of a summit hosted by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Monday. German authorities have arrested 5 men suspected of planning an attack on a Christmas market in Bavaria. The suspects were detained Friday at the Zuben border crossing between Germany and Austria. Officials said the suspects intended to carry out a vehicle attack in the Dingolfing-Landau area, but had not chosen a specific market or date. Early intervention by the security services, including the Bavarian Office for the Protection of the Constitution and the police, prevented the attack, and authorities described the operation as a success for Germany's security apparatus. Germany has faced a series of vehicle ramming attacks in the recent years, including the 2016 Berlin Christmas market attack and a deadly assault in Magdeburg last December. U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, John Cole, has said that Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko had committed to doing everything possible to stop balloons carrying contraband from entering Lithuania. Speaking in Vilnius after 2 days of talks, Cole noted that the balloons have forced more than a dozen airport closures in recent months. Lithuania has declared a state of emergency and requested military support for police and border guards, accusing Belarus of a hybrid attack for facilitating the activity. Cole expressed confidence that Lukashenko was sincerely working to resolve the issue.
His neighbors, so he assures me, and I have a good.
And farmers near the Pyrenees blocked a highway in Villefranche-de-Conflans to join nationwide protests against the mass culling of cattle aimed at controlling lumpy skin disease. Authorities plan to vaccinate 1 million cows in the coming weeks, but farmers argue that culling healthy animals is excessive and not proven to stop the virus. Protesters blocked the D66 highway with tractors, distributed flyers, and called for broader access to vaccines. French officials say a combination of culling vaccination and the movement restrictions is necessary to contain the disease and protect cattle exports. Hong Kong's Democratic Party, the city's last major opposition party, voted to disband under pressure from Beijing's years-long crackdown on dissent. And of 121 votes cast, 117 supported disbanding. And founded in 1994, the party was a leading voice for democratic reforms and freedoms in Hong Kong. And the decision follows mass pro-democracy protests in 2019 and the imposition of a national security law in 2020, under which several senior party members have been jailed or detained.
Over the past 30 years. To have journeyed through these 3 decades, shoulder to shoulder with the people of Hong Kong.
Australian media reported that the person who seized the weapon from one of the attackers at the Bondi beach is a Muslim man named Ahmed El Ahmed. And the reports said that Ahmed El Ahmed was injured while overpowering the Sydney attacker, sustaining 2 gunshot wounds and is currently receiving treatment.
Oh mon gros!
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has expressed shock over the tragic attack at the Bondi beach. In a post on X, she extended heartfelt condolences to the families and loved ones of the victims. She affirmed solidarity with Australia and the Jewish communities worldwide. The European Commission President emphasized that Europe remains united in opposition to violence, anti-Semitism, and hatred in all its forms. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has sent warm wishes to the Jewish families in the UK and worldwide for the Hanukkah, and expressing hope that the Festival of Lights brings peace and comfort. In a post on X, Starmer described the anti-Semitic terrorist attack at Bondi Beach as sickening, and condolences were extended to the victims and their families. He affirmed solidarity with Australia and the Jewish community. And French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that an anti-Semitic terrorist attack was carried out in Sydney, targeting families celebrating Hanukkah. In a post on X, he extended thoughts to the victims and the injured and their loved ones and expressed solidarity with the Australian people. Macron emphasized that anti-Semitic hatred, which harms all societies, will continue to be fought against relentlessly wherever it emerges. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has strongly condemned the ghastly terrorist attack that was carried out at Bondi Beach and targeting Hanukkah celebrants. In a post on X, condolences were extended to the families of those who lost their lives, and solidarity was expressed with the people of Australia in this time of grief. Modi reaffirmed India's zero tolerance for terrorism and pledged support for the global fight against all forms and manifestations of terrorism. Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed the kingdom's condemnation of the terrorist attack that took place in Sydney, Australia, which resulted in the death and injury of several people. The ministry reaffirmed the kingdom's stance against all forms of violence, terrorism and extremism, offering sincere condolences and sympathy to the families of the victims, as well as to the government and people of Australia. It also wished for the speedy recovery of the injured. Qatar's foreign ministry has condemned the attack that was carried out at the Bondi Beach near Sydney, which resulted in deaths and injuries. In a statement by the foreign ministry, Qatar reaffirmed its firm stance against violence, terrorism and criminal acts, regardless of motive. Condolences were expressed to the victims' families and wishes for a speedy recovery were extended to those injured. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has reported that at least one Israeli was killed and another injured in the Sydney shooting. It added that hospital visits to the wounded Israeli are being arranged by Israel's Consul General in Australia, and communication has been maintained with the family. Washington Governor Bob Ferguson has warned that the state faces weeks or months of hardship as severe flooding continues to inundate communities. Ferguson said the situation would be tremendously stressful for thousands of residents and pointing to homes swept away by floodwaters. Emergency crews and National Guard troops were assisting evacuations in western Washington, where towns along the swollen Saguit River were bracing for possible levee failures. The flooding follows days of heavy rain triggered by a series of atmospheric river storms that have drenched the Pacific Northwest and parts of the northern Rocky Mountains. Kyiv has experienced its first snowfall of the winter, covering streets, parks and playgrounds in a fresh blanket of snow. City authorities deployed snow-clearing vehicles on major roads and bridges, while crews worked to clear sidewalks, crossings and public transport stops. Forecasters warned of icy roads and wet snow, but residents embraced the winter weather, building snowmen, sledding down hills and enjoying playful snowball fights. Dogs and children alike brought energy to the snow-covered streets, transforming the city into a lively winter scene. And early skiers in the French Alps enjoyed abundant snow and bright sunshine over the weekend as the 2025-2026 ski season got underway. Drone footage showed mountain slopes blanketed in compact snow, with skiers and snowboarders taking advantage of the uncrowded conditions. Temperatures ranged from 3 degrees to 6 degrees Celsius, creating ideal conditions for winter sports. Last season, the French Alps recorded around 48.2 million skier days. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. But before we wrap up, here's a recap of the top stories making headlines this hour. U.S. temporarily pauses sharing key intelligence with Israel over Gaza war. Israeli airstrikes kill 3 across southern Lebanon. U.S. and Ukraine delegations meet German Chancellor in Berlin. And for more stories and live updates, do follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG. And from all of us here, thank you for watching and stay tuned for more news and analysis on Q News.